This is Field Notes from the Proving, short reflections from inside the process of building a life that's earned, not perfected, earned. Something strange happens after you accomplish something big. You think the finish line will feel a little bit like closure, like you did the thing and now you can relax. But sometimes the finish line doesn't feel like closure at all. Sometimes it creates a question. Was it real or was it a fluke? The week after, the Norfolk Half Marathon was quiet. Everything honestly felt tight. Your legs were stiff, but physically you were fine. So life kind of resumed. I went back to work, back to the same old routine, got my morning, coffee every day, back to the same emails, the commute, the same chaos. And for a moment, it was normal. But underneath that normal, something strange was honestly happening. Because you got to realize for months, your life had direction. Every run kind of meant something. Every mile had a purpose. And suddenly the structure kind of just disappears. And there's another kind of like strange thing about accomplishments. Like at first everyone cares. You announce the race and people ask about the training. They kind of get excited for you. But after a while, life moves on. You show the medal, you tell the story, you relive the finish line, you visualize the finish line again. Maybe you're excited about how you crossed and you recognize yourself, crossing and seeing yourself from afar. But then, those visuals kind of subside and slowly people stop asking. The medal randomly sits somewhere in a bedroom, a closet, a drawer, some bin, whatever. The moment solely becomes a memory. And suddenly the thing that felt huge a week ago feels quiet. But underneath the quiet, something else starts to build, a quiet confidence. It's not loud, not arrogant, just this weird, subtle realization. Maybe that I could reach for more, or I wasn't fully there yet. But the thought had started to form because at this point, I'd gone under 2 hours for a half marathon. It was like a real milestone for me. But the question really still lingered, quite honestly. Was this real or was it beginner's luck? And that's when the old formula, honestly, for me started to kind of fall back into place. The voice that had shaped so much of my life. I remember, quite honestly, the voice inside my head saying, Chris, you didn't really earn that. That was a fluke. You couldn't do that again. And when you grow up inside this formula, quite honestly, this like inner voice, success really doesn't become real until it becomes repeatable. I always felt like if I did it once, I had to do it a second time to prove it again and again and again. Because this formula that my mind lived in was evidence-based. It was consistency-based and certainty-based. So the immediate decision wasn't really about celebration. It became about proof. Proof that I was what I said I was, and proof that you couldn't take this accomplishment away from me. So for about 5 days after the Norfolk Half Marathon, I signed up for another race. Of course. It was the Naptown Half Marathon in Annapolis on December 21st, 2024. Another half marathon about a month later. And this time the mission was simple, to prove it wasn't beginner's luck. And if you know anything about perfectionists, you already know what happens next. Because it wasn't just about finishing again. Of course not. I had to beat the time. So for the next month, under the freezing New Jersey winter, I kept running. Outside, in the cold, sometimes honestly even in the snow, trying to hold on to momentum, trying to just prove that that first race wasn't a fluke and proving that this wasn't a moment, but truly an identity shift. There's this like strange trap inside this formula. It doesn't just make you question failure. It makes you question the successes too. You accomplish something real, and instead of celebrating it, your brain just demands proof over and over again and again. And it's like without realizing it, that's how the next race began. Not as a celebration, but as a test. Basically to prove that that first finish line was real and that I truly did deserve it and earn it.